John Jones, a 26-year-old thrill-seeker, sets his sights on Nutty Putty Cave in the Utah desert, just outside Salt Lake City. Now, this isn't his first rodeo with caving. He and his brother Josh had explored various caves around Utah before. But Nutty Putty, that was a whole new beast. It was a popular cave, known for being relatively beginner-friendly, with spots like a huge maze and a giant slide that anyone could check out. But it also had some tricky areas, including the infamous birth canal, a narrow squeeze that only the most experienced adventurers dared to tackle. John wasn't alone on this trip. He had a crew of 11, including family and friends, tagging along. While the cave had been closed off for a while due to some accidents, Josh managed to score a special permit, and on November 24, 2009, the group was allowed inside. The rest of the crew stuck to the easy stuff, but John and Josh, they had different plans. Let's find something a bit more challenging, they thought, and off they went to explore the tighter, more intense parts of the cave. They made their way to the birth canal, which was pretty much the tightest squeeze in the entire cave. After successfully navigating that, they found the corkscrew, a winding, twisted tunnel that only the bravest, or most daring, would attempt. Now, 5 years prior, another caver named Brock Clark had gotten stuck in the corkscrew for 14 hours, but John wasn't intimidated. At 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, he figured he'd be fine. Little did he know, he was about to enter uncharted territory. He kept pushing forward, thinking he was still navigating the birth canal, but things quickly went sideways. John slid deeper into the tunnel, his feet kicking as he tried to hold on and push back up. He called out to Josh to stop, and they started trying to figure out how to get him unstuck. John spotted a hole ahead, thinking it would lead to a larger space, but nope, it was a dead end. And just like that, John was wedged upside down, stuck in an 18 by 10-inch hole. Desperation set in as he screamed for help, but Josh's attempts to pull him out didn't work. After a while, Josh, now exhausted, had to leave to get help, leaving John to hang upside down, the pressure from gravity slowly making things worse. Fast forward 3 hours, and the first rescuer arrives. The team tried using ropes to pull John out, but that didn't work either. They then set up a pulley system, the same kind that had freed Brock Clark years earlier. It took hours, but finally, John was raised enough for the rescuer to make eye contact with him and even give him some Gatorade. Unfortunately, John's legs had turned lifeless and were no longer helping the situation. They seriously considered breaking his legs to get him out, but then, just as they were getting closer to freeing him, disaster struck. The pulley rope snapped, hitting the rescuer in the face and knocking him out cold. As if things weren't crazy enough, John slipped back into the hole, and the team had to spend another hour repairing the pulley system before they could try again. When they finally attempted to pull him out once more, John didn't respond. Panic set in as they realized they couldn't lift him without his assistance. A medic was sent inside the cave to check on John, but by 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, John was declared dead. The cave was closed off with concrete, and a plaque was placed to honor his life. It's a tragic adventure that no one could have predicted. A story of bravery, perseverance, and an unfortunate twist of fate that ended too soon. On January 20th, 2016, Gao Yaning, a 23-year-old man, was driving a Tesla Model S along the far left lane of a multi-lane expressway in Handan, Hebei Province, China. Traffic flowed smoothly until it didn't. A street sweeper truck was parked on the left shoulder, partially extending into the driving lane. The car in front of Gao moved over to avoid it. His Tesla didn't. There was no braking, no swerve, just a violent crash. The Model S plowed into the back of the truck. Gao was killed on impact. Dashcam footage later circulated in Chinese media showed the Tesla closing in on the stopped vehicle with no visible reaction from the driver. Gao's father believed his son was using autopilot. Tesla didn't confirm or deny it. In a statement, they said they had no way of knowing whether or not autopilot was engaged at the time of the crash, as telemetry data couldn't be retrieved remotely due to the damage. Still, Gao's family pursued the truth. In July 2016, they filed a lawsuit against the Tesla dealership that sold the car. Local police initially blamed Gao for the crash, but his family pushed back. Their lawyer explained that the case wasn't just about compensation, it was a warning. Self-driving technology has flaws. Tesla shouldn't market autopilot as a selling point for young people. The missing data remained a problem. Telemetry was stored on an SD card inside the car, inaccessible without Tesla's help. In 2018, the company provided a decoding key to a third party for independent review. Tesla stated, "While the third-party appraisal is not yet complete, we have no reason to believe autopilot ever functioned other than as designed." But then, a shift. Chinese media reported that Tesla had received the data and confirmed autopilot was active in the 2 minutes before the crash. Tesla responded quietly. The company removed the word autopilot from its Chinese website, a small but symbolic retreat. No court ever ruled autopilot was at fault, but serious questions lingered. Why didn't the system detect the stopped truck? Why didn't it slow or warn the driver? If the driver was unresponsive, shouldn't autopilot have disengaged? Tesla always said autopilot was an assistive feature, not a self-driving system. But for many users, especially young ones, it felt like more. The line between assistance and autonomy was blurred. Gao Yanning's crash made that line painfully clear. The truck didn't move. The Tesla didn't stop. The driver never reacted. The lawsuit eventually stalled, but the story remained a national cautionary tale. A reminder that even semi-autonomous systems can fail, and that marketing dreams of automation may carry deadly consequences. Wan Tun didn't just lose a young man that day. It lost faith in a promise that the car of the future would know when to stop. It all started like any other day. Bright skies, a little heat in the air, and the kind of energy that builds up when people come together for something bigger than themselves. In Austin, Texas, 20-year-old Justin Howell, a student at Texas State University, was ready to make his voice heard. The Black Lives Matter movement was sweeping the nation, and like thousands of others, Justin was marching for justice, equality, and an end to police brutality. He was part of a wave of protests triggered by the tragic death of George Floyd just days earlier. It was a simple aim, demanding accountability for the officers involved and a world where no one had to fear the very people sworn to protect them. The protests in Austin, like in many other cities, were largely peaceful. But as tensions built and emotions ran high, something tragic unfolded. On May 31, 2020, Justin was standing in the middle of the crowd, fighting for change when an officer from the Austin Police Department fired a less lethal beanbag round. The officer missed the intended target, and the round struck Justin in the head, causing a catastrophic injury. Justin was left critically injured with a fractured skull and severe brain damage. Fellow protesters quickly tried to rush him to safety, only to be met with more police fire. The chaos that followed left Justin's life forever altered, and yet his story was far from over. Though his situation was dire, the protests that followed Justin's injury became a focal point for many. What was supposed to be a peaceful demand for change had now escalated into something far more sinister. The police were supposed to be keeping the peace, but instead they were becoming a force of fear. This tragic incident highlighted the risks of militarized policing and the need for reform. The very people who were supposed to protect Justin had become a part of the problem. But even in the face of such devastation, Justin's story isn't one of hopelessness. He became a symbol of the struggle, the face of what happens when peaceful protests are met with violent suppression. His journey from that moment on was painful, but it sparked conversations, change, and a renewed commitment to justice. People rallied around Justin, and his case became another rallying cry for those demanding a more just society. The world began to take notice, not just of the injustice that led to his injury, but of the resilience of a generation that refused to back down. Justin's story reminds us that no matter how dark things seem, the fight for justice is one worth fighting. His injuries were a brutal reminder of the need for reform, but they also reminded the world of the importance of standing up for what's right. even when the road ahead seems perilous. The measures that need to be taken to prevent such incidents are clear: more accountability, more transparency, and an end to excessive force in peaceful demonstrations. In the end, Justin Howell may not have been just another face in the crowd. He was, and still is, a beacon of hope, a young man who, in the face of violence, stood up for the values of equality and justice. While his body was broken by the system, his spirit became an unbreakable force. The world may have witnessed his suffering, but it also witnessed his strength and the love from his community, which continued to support him as he recovered. Justin Howell may have been one of the most horrific casualties of the protests, but his sacrifice wasn't in vain. He will always be remembered, not for how he fell, but for how he fought, and that's a fight we all need to carry on. 32-year-old Gregory Wilhelm and his 3 buddies, 2 guys and 2 gals, are living their best vacation life in Maui, Hawaii. They're soaking up the sun, snapping selfies, and doing all the classic touristy stuff. One day, they decide to check out Wayanapanapa State Park. You know, the kind of place that makes you want to launch a travel blog. Everything was going great until it wasn't. While wandering around, the crew stumbled upon the legendary Wayanapanapa Caves. Intrigued and running on vacation adrenaline, the group paused by a serene, well-lit pool at the cave's mouth. The women opted to chill poolside, probably imagining spa vibes, while Gregory, powered by curiosity and maybe a little too much confidence, roped one of the guys into a spontaneous cave exploration mission. Now, they didn't have a flashlight, but Gregory, ever the problem solver, shoved his phone into a Ziploc bag to keep it dry and turned it into an impromptu flashlight. Not exactly Bear Grylls approved, but hey, it worked for a while. So Gregory and his fellow explorer waded into the cave like it was the beginning of a treasure hunting adventure. A few feet in, the water was already at their waists. Ahead, a massive boulder, and beneath it, a dark, deep pool that apparently was a hotspot for thrill-seeking divers. Naturally, they decided to give it a quick dive. Just a minute underwater, they said. Just a little peek, no big deal. Gregory led the way with his trusty phone light while his buddy followed closely behind. But things took a wild turn when they realized the pool was a lot deeper than expected. Gregory, fueled by that just one more peek energy, swam into a narrow underwater passage. That's when his friend, now absolutely done with this adventure, freaked out and made a silent exit, leaving Gregory solo in the watery abyss. By the time Gregory realized he was on his own, he needed air, badly, but when he turned around, he was met with total darkness, cue panic mode. He fumbled through the underwater maze and managed to find a tiny pocket of air, like something straight out of an action movie, but the cave was like a living creature, unpredictable and wild. Waves thrashed, currents shifted, and the clock was ticking. With no choice, Gregory pushed deeper into the cave. Meanwhile, the guy who bailed managed to find his way back to the surface, gasping for breath at the pool's edge. Gregory, however, was MIA. Panic spread fast. The 2 women dashed into the cave, talk about bravery, found the guy totally freaking out, and knew things were serious. The guy, guilt now fully unlocked, dove back into the cave, telling the women to scream so he could use their voices like human GPS. After a couple failed dives, he finally spotted something, a faint glow in the distance. It was Gregory's phone, still valiantly shining, but Gregory? Nowhere in sight. They sprinted out and called the Hana Fire Department, kicking off a full-blown rescue operation. Sadly, by the time help arrived, it was too late. Reports revealed Gregory had lost his bearings in a tight spot. The more he tried to escape, the more disoriented he became. Eventually, he took a wrong turn, and his breath ran out in the cave's suffocating darkness. It seemed like just another sunny Florida day for 40-year-old Joshua Brown. The skies were clear, traffic was chill, and according to a witness, he might have been enjoying a Harry Potter movie while cruising in his sleek Tesla Model S. A perfect day for a drive, or so it seemed, but just moments later, that ordinary ride turned fatal. On May 7, 2016, Joshua was driving down U.S. Highway 27 near Williston, Florida. His Tesla was in autopilot mode, which, despite what the name might suggest, isn't a fully self-driving system. It's more like cruise control with a techie glow-up. Still, with 37 minutes of autopilot engaged and only occasional steering nudges from Joshua, the car was mostly doing its thing, until it didn't. As an 18-wheel tractor-trailer began making a left turn across the highway, the Tesla, cruising at 74 miles per hour, failed to slow down. Neither the car nor the driver noticed the truck's white side blending into the sunlit sky. The Tesla didn't brake. Instead, it shot forward, right under the trailer. It was a type of crash called an underride. The top of the Tesla was sheared clean off, everything above the belt line destroyed. Joshua didn't survive. The car kept going for nearly 900 feet, finally stopping after plowing through 2 fences and smashing into a utility pole. The truck driver later said it all happened so fast, he didn't even see the Tesla before it blew through his trailer like a wizarding express. Strangely, the Harry Potter movie Joshua was allegedly watching was still playing inside the wreckage. Now, let's pause for a second. Was autopilot at fault, or was it just a tragic coincidence? According to Tesla, this was their first known autopilot-related fatality after over 130 million miles driven with the feature on. For perspective, they noted that in the US, there's typically 1 fatality for every 94 million miles driven. Still, just one crash like this was enough to get people seriously worried. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, jumped in and started digging. They found that the Tesla gave 13 hands-not-detected alerts before the crash, basically saying, "Yo, you still there?" Joshua responded, but often with a 16-second delay. Ultimately, they found no defects in the autopilot system itself, but made one thing very clear. Just because autopilot is on doesn't mean you can tune out. The driver is still in charge. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, later concluded the crash was caused by a deadly combo, the truck driver failing to yield and Joshua's overtrust in autopilot. He didn't react in time because, well, he trusted the car too much, and to be fair, the car let him do that. Tesla's system allowed for long stretches of minimal interaction, basically enabling autopilot daydreaming, which turned out to be a fatal flaw. The aftermath of Joshua's death sent ripples through the auto industry. Tesla, regulators, and safety experts all took a hard look at how these systems were being used and misused. Tesla updated its autopilot features, making sure drivers are now nudged more often to stay engaged, and public awareness around the limits of self-driving tech has grown. While nothing can undo what happened to Joshua, his story became a wake-up call. It taught us that cool tech doesn't equal invincibility, and that a little overconfidence, especially behind the wheel, can be deadly. The silver lining? Tragedies like this have forced automakers and regulators to step up. Autopilot systems are smarter, safety standards are stricter, and people are finally asking the hard questions about what autonomous really means, because in the end, even the smartest car still needs a fully present driver. On the morning of July 29, 2024, Isaías Jacob Fuenmayor Gonzalez, a 15-year-old from San Francisco Zulia State, was just another teenager excited for his 15th birthday party. He stepped out that day to rehearse a dance routine with friends, his mind far from the chaos about to unfold. But as the sun began to dip lower, the streets outside his rehearsal space erupted into protest. It was the day after the controversial Venezuelan presidential election, and many, including Isaías, were demanding justice for what they believed was a rigged result. Despite the tense atmosphere, Isaías, caught up in the heat of the moment, joined the crowd outside the Matias Losada High School to protest the re-election of Nicolás Maduro. Little did he know that his innocent act of defiance would be his last. The protests were sparked by the announcement of Maduro's victory, which many believed lacked transparency and legitimacy. International observers, including the United Nations and the Carter Center, had raised alarms, claiming the process was deeply flawed. Yet, people like Isaías were determined to make their voices heard, fighting for a fair election and the hope of a better future. But as the evening wore on, violence erupted. National Guard troops on motorbikes clashed with protesters, attempting to break up the crowds. Amid the chaos, a group of armed pro-government colectivos joined in, further escalating the situation. In a tragic turn of events, a bullet struck Isaías in the neck. He was rushed to the hospital, but the young protester died shortly after due to blood loss. His family was left shattered, especially his sister, who couldn't comprehend how a peaceful, carefree day had ended in such horror. "He was a child who did not deserve to die," she said, her words hanging heavy in the air. Isaías' story is not just one of tragic loss, it's a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those willing to stand up for their beliefs in the face of oppression. Isaías, like many others who perished in the protests, became a symbol of the cost of fighting for justice in a broken system. His death, alongside the killings of at least 23 others during the protests, shined a light on the brutality unleashed by Venezuelan authorities against their own citizens. These young people weren't just fighting for political power, they were fighting for the basic right to be heard, to have their votes counted, and to live in a country where human rights were respected. While his death was senseless and brutal, the love Isaías' family and community had for him didn't fade. It fueled the ongoing struggle for justice. He may have died too young, but his memory lives on as a call for change, a plea for a future where no one else has to suffer in the same way. What's clear from Isaías' story, and the stories of those like him, is the need for accountability. The international community must act swiftly to ensure that these human rights violations are not swept under the rug. Venezuela needs transparency, and the people need to know their voices matter. It's heartbreaking that so many have lost their lives for something so simple yet so fundamental, the right to live free from fear and oppression. So while Isaías' life was tragically cut short, his legacy is one of courage and love. His death is a reminder that these protests were not just about politics. They were about justice, and they were about a brighter, freer future for all Venezuelans. Let's honor his memory by pushing for the changes needed to prevent such tragedies, and remember that every person who died in these protests did so because they believed in a better tomorrow. On September 17, 2000, brothers Michael and Paul Hayden decided it was time for a little nostalgic adventure, or what some might call a terrible idea wrapped in childhood memories. They headed into Goss Canyon in La Crescenta, Montrose, California, to revisit a cave they had explored many times as kids with their 4 other siblings. This wasn't just any cave. It was like nature's own booby-trapped funhouse, complete with dry ledges, mysterious holes, and a deep, dark water pool that dropped about 100 feet. Because, hey, who doesn't love a little danger with their reminiscing? To get in, they had to squeeze through a cozy little cave mouth about the size of a dishwasher, just 3 by 4 feet, leading to a narrow 50-foot horizontal tunnel. Paul, being the brave one, or maybe just the one with cooler gear, took the lead. And he wasn't your average weekend spelunker. He was a master sergeant and elite scuba diver in the Air Force Pararescue Force. Basically, if anyone could handle this, it was him. He strapped on his scuba gear, enough air for 2 hours, and a GoPro on his head to light the way and record the epic journey. Meanwhile, Michael stayed back by the water pool like the world's most responsible cave lifeguard. The brothers rigged up a rope system, tying one end to a big old boulder in the main cave. Michael would tug the rope occasionally like, "Hey, you good?" And Paul would tug back like, "All good, bro." For the first 20 minutes, it was all smooth sailing, or rather, smooth tugging, but then nothing. Michael gave the rope a double yank. Silence. He tried again. Still nothing. Worse, the rope had gone stiff and immobile. Never a good sign. Thinking Paul might be stuck, Michael gave it everything he had, yanking like his life, or, more accurately, Paul's life, depended on it. When that didn't work, he bolted from the cave faster than a teenager sneaking in past curfew and called in the pros. The local fire department wasted no time. Soon enough, they were joined by the LA Sheriff's Office and the LA Fire Department, rushing to the scene like it was a Hollywood action movie. When rescuers located Paul's GoPro, they reviewed the footage, and what they found was haunting. The video captured the moment Paul reached an abandoned water shaft and removed his regulator to take a breath from an air pocket. Now, here's the thing about air pockets in creepy old caves. They're not exactly spa-quality oxygen bars. These pockets don't circulate fresh air. Instead, they stew in a gross cocktail of decay gases from surrounding soil, rock, and whatever unlucky critters decomposed nearby. Add in gases released from water-eroded stone, and you've got yourself a bubble full of CO2 doom. Even though Paul was a skilled scuba diver, he wasn't a certified cave diver. He knew the risks and usually carried a lighter to test air quality. Light the flame, and if it flickers out, you bail. But that day, he didn't have his lighter. He took a breath anyway, assuming the air would be fine just for a second. It wasn't. The footage ended with Paul slipping beneath the water, making no move to replace his regulator. He passed out instantly, overcome by the toxic air. Within a minute or two, he had drowned, silently, suddenly, and tragically. It was a cool California morning on March the 23rd, 2018. The sun was rising, people were grabbing coffee, and 38-year-old Apple engineer Walter Huang was driving his Tesla Model X to work. It should have been a smooth ride down US Highway 101, something he'd probably done 100 times. But this drive would be his last. Just before 9:30 a.m., Walter's Tesla, in autopilot mode, veered left, straight into a narrow concrete barrier at the exit to Highway 85 in Mountain View. That might have been survivable except the crash attenuator, a kind of safety cushion meant to soften impacts, had already been damaged days before and never repaired. The Model X hit the barrier, got slammed by two other cars, and then caught fire. Walter was pulled from the wreck, but he didn't make it. The cause of death, blunt force trauma, and that's where things got messy. Turns out, autopilot had been running for almost 19 minutes before the crash. Walter's hands were on the wheel, but only for 34 seconds total. In the final 6 seconds, nada. The car was doing its thing, unwatched, unchecked, and heading toward disaster. Data showed that 7 seconds before the crash, the Tesla started steering left, mistaking road markings. Instead of following the correct line, it picked the wrong one, like a GPS from hell. At that moment, the car sped up to over 70 miles per hour and, with no obstacle detected, hit the unprotected barrier like a battering ram. But wait, it gets even more frustrating. The barrier Walter hit had been crushed in another crash on March 12th. Caltrans wasn't even told about it until March 20th. By then, Walter had only days left. The fix came 3 days too late, on March 26th after his death. Turns out, this barrier had been damaged more than any other in the entire Bay Area, and repairs were often delayed for weeks or even months. This was the traffic equivalent of a trapdoor. Even worse, Walter had reportedly complained before about his Tesla veering toward that very barrier while on autopilot. He knew something wasn't right, but like many drivers, he trusted the system a little too much. He might have also been playing a game on his phone at the time. Yup, reports say distraction from mobile gaming may have played a role too. So, what went wrong? According to the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, it was a deadly combo. Tesla's autopilot wasn't smart enough to handle that stretch of road. Walter put too much faith in it. The system didn't make sure he was paying attention, and the highway safety barrier that should have saved his life, not working. Tesla and federal investigators ended up in a public slap fight. Tesla released crash details quickly. NTSB was like, "Hey, that's our job," and booted Tesla from the investigation team. Elon Musk clapped back, basically saying, "We do what we want, safety first." In the end, the NTSB laid out several recommendations. Improve driver monitoring. Don't let autopilot operate where it's not designed to. Fix damaged barriers faster. And hey, maybe stop playing Candy Crush while doing 70 in a metal box. The Huang family sued Tesla, and in April 2024, Tesla quietly settled. But here's the thing. This tragic case sparked change. Tesla tightened how autopilot monitors driver attention. Road maintenance procedures got stricter, and regulators are now pushing harder for cars that truly watch the driver as much as the road. Walter's death was painful and preventable, but it didn't go unnoticed. Because every crash like this reminds us, technology isn't magic, and safety doesn't come from trusting a car. It comes from staying alert, fixing what's broken, and never, ever assuming the robot has it all figured out. On a warm summer morning, June 19, 2020, 65-year-old Reagan Russell, an animal rights activist from Hamilton, Ontario, set out on what seemed like a normal day of peaceful protest. For decades, Reagan had been the voice for animals, fighting against cruelty in all its forms. That day, she was part of a group from Toronto Pig Save, an organization dedicated to raising awareness about the treatment of pigs, standing outside Fearman's Pork Slaughterhouse in Burlington, Ontario. They were there to give water to the pigs being transported to their grim fate, hoping to make a small, humane gesture in an often brutal system. Reagan's activism wasn't limited to just one cause. She was a passionate advocate for animal rights, women's rights, and Black Lives Matter, never afraid to challenge the status quo. She believed in breaking unjust laws to change the world, much like the suffragists or those who fought against slavery. To Reagan, protesting wasn't just about making noise. It was about making a real difference, about standing up for what was right. Her journey as an activist began at 24 with a protest against seal culling, and since then she dedicated her life to speaking out for those who couldn't. That fateful morning, as she and her fellow activists watered the pigs in transit, the situation took a tragic turn. Reagan, after giving the pigs a much-needed drink, stepped aside to allow a supply truck to pass. But as the truck carrying pigs turned into the slaughterhouse driveway, the driver, apparently unaware of Reagan's position, proceeded forward. Reagan, standing at the edge of the driveway, made a peace sign to the driver, unaware that this simple act of solidarity would be her last. The truck, moving at a slow speed of 12.7 miles per hour, ran over her and dragged her several yards before finally stopping, her life extinguished instantly. Reagan's tragic death was ruled an accident, and the driver, Andrew Blake, was convicted of careless driving, causing death. He received a sentence of probation and a fine, but for many, the legal repercussions didn't feel sufficient for the loss of someone so dedicated to her cause. Her death sparked outrage and sparked international protests in her memory, from die-ins in London to sit-ins in Italy, even inspiring a rally in downtown Toronto. Though the world mourned Reagan, her spirit lived on in the work she began. Joaquin Phoenix, a fellow animal rights advocate, led a protest in her honor outside Fearman's Pork Slaughterhouse, pledging to continue the fight she had started. Animal rights groups across the globe, from India to the United States, rallied together, vowing that Reagan's death would not be in vain. Her passing also sparked a legal battle over the law that led to her death, with advocacy groups seeking to overturn the legislation that restricted protests like the one she had participated in. Reagan's legacy wasn't just about the protests, though. It was about the lives she touched and the change she inspired. Posthumously, she was awarded the Dr. John Rumney Award for her dedication to animal rights, and a short film about her life was showcased at the International Vegan Film Festival. Her story continues to inspire activists worldwide, reminding us of the power of standing up for what's right, even when it seems impossible. While Reagan's death was tragic, it became a catalyst for greater awareness and action. The cruelty she fought against still exists, but her memory serves as a beacon of hope. As we honor her life, we are reminded of the importance of compassion, justice, and standing up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Reagan may be gone, but her legacy is very much alive, inspiring a new generation to fight for a better world. On a chilly afternoon around 3:45 p.m. on November 28, 1985, 7 adventurous souls decided to ditch turkey leftovers and go for something a bit more extreme, caving. Their original plan was to explore Freyr's Hole, but thanks to some not-so-friendly rain flooding the place, they switched gears and chose Fuller's entrance of the Culverson Creek Cave in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Sounds like a safe plan B, right? Well, not exactly. Here's the thing. None of the group had ever been in Fuller's before. You know, just a casual spelunk in unfamiliar territory. What could go wrong? The entrance of the cave was a narrow canyon, only about 5 to 8 feet wide, with a fast-flowing stream, about 6 to 12 inches deep, gushing over wobbly rock slabs. Not exactly a 5-star hiking trail. Roughly 50 feet in, the path sloped downward, and smack dab in the middle of it all sat a hefty boulder, chilling in the stream like it owned the place. At 3:50 p.m., 3 of the cavers made it past the boulder with no issues. The next trio followed, led by 26-year-old Eric Sackley. But when Eric got to the center of that giant rock, Mother Nature decided to throw a curveball. With a sudden shift, the boulder tilted left, like it had just remembered an appointment, and pinned Eric's head in a horrifying upright position. His friends immediately jumped into action. One sprinted back to get help while the rest tried to free him. 4 people against 1 rock? The rock wasn't budging. It was basically saying, "Nice try." Thinking quickly, one caver supported Eric from below to keep pressure off his neck, while the others rummaged through the cave entrance, MacGyver style, searching for anything that could work as a lever. Someone found old truck parts, because of course there's random truck debris in a cave, but even that wasn't enough muscle to lift the boulder. So, another caver was sent out to grab a hydraulic auto jack, a car jack that could lift a small house if needed, and another contacted the Eastern Region Cave Rescue Network. Things were escalating fast. By 4:10 p.m., tragedy deepened. Eric lost consciousness less than half a minute after the rock pinned him. Despite that, at 3:59 p.m., one of the group, John Evans, felt his pulse, and it was still going strong. There was hope. Time, however, was not on their side. Around 4:20 p.m., their hero tool, the hydraulic jack, finally made its dramatic entrance. Combined with some trusty crowbars, the team managed to shift the stubborn boulder. They carefully moved Eric about 20 feet to a dry spot and immediately started CPR. The rescue squad from Rainek showed up like cavalry soon after, with a paramedic taking over at 4:29 p.m. Things were looking cautiously optimistic. Eric was rushed out on a stretcher and whisked away by ambulance to the hospital. On the way, medical pros tried everything: IVs, cardiac meds, the whole 9 yards. But despite all the efforts, nothing could bring him back. Eric Sackley was officially pronounced dead at 6:05 p.m. It was a heartbreaking end to what started as an adventurous detour. The story of Culverson Creek Cave is a somber reminder that even the boldest of explorers face real dangers in the deep unknown. One misstep, or in this case one shifting boulder, can change everything in seconds. Sunday, April 29th, 2018. It was just before 3 p.m. on the Tomei Expressway in Kanagawa, Japan. The roads buzzed with weekend traffic, and on the far right lane, a group of motorcyclists had pulled over to help a fallen friend after a minor accident. Among them was a 44-year-old man, standing ahead of the group, trying to redirect traffic, keeping everyone else safe. He never saw it coming. A Tesla Model X, cruising up the expressway with autopilot engaged, didn't stop. It didn't slow. In fact, it accelerated from 24 to 38 kilometers per hour, from 15 to 24 miles per hour, as the vehicle ahead of it changed lanes. It wasn't dodging the hazard. It was simply resuming speed. Then, with nothing to intervene, it plowed into the parked van, the motorcycles, and the man standing in the lane. He died at the scene. What happened? The answer starts with the driver. He'd activated autopilot at 2:11 p.m., not long after joining the expressway. By 2:22 p.m., the system detected his hands on the wheel. Then, silence. At some point before the crash at 2:49 p.m., the driver fell asleep. As the car approached the site of the earlier motorcycle accident, a vehicle in front moved over to the left lane to avoid the parked group. Autopilot interpreted that as a green light. With no obstacles detected ahead, it began accelerating. The driver, asleep and disengaged, didn't react. Autopilot didn't either. Tragedy followed. The victim wasn't a careless jaywalker or an inattentive pedestrian. He was someone trying to help, someone doing everything right. But in the eyes of the Tesla, he was just another data point it failed to process. The aftermath was messy, legally, technically, and emotionally. Japanese courts convicted the driver of criminal negligence. He received a 3-year prison sentence, suspended for 5 years. A consequence, but a lenient one, given the finality of what happened. Then came the lawsuit, filed not in Japan, but in the U.S., where Tesla is based. The plaintiffs sued in a federal court in California in April 2020, claiming that autopilot was the real culprit. According to their complaint, Tesla's system had fatal flaws, no reliable way to detect inattentive drivers, and poor ability to handle emergency roadside scenarios, exactly the kind that real-world drivers routinely encounter. They also noted this was the first known pedestrian fatality involving autopilot. Tesla, in turn, argued the case should be heard in Japan. The California judge agreed and dismissed the suit for forum nonconvenience. The plaintiffs appealed, but in 2021, the Ninth Circuit upheld the dismissal. If the case was to be heard, it would have to be in Japan, and yet the questions lingered, far beyond courtrooms. Why didn't autopilot recognize the parked vehicles? Why did it accelerate toward danger? Why wasn't there an effective failsafe when the driver became unresponsive? This wasn't just a story about one man falling asleep at the wheel. It was a spotlight on the illusion of autonomy, how systems that appear smart can be blind, and how people, lulled by automation, can check out before the job is done. The Model X did what it was told. The driver didn't. The technology didn't compensate. And a man trying to help others died because of it. In the years since, Tesla has updated autopilot's capabilities. Driver monitoring systems have improved, though many say they still lag behind what's truly needed. But no software update can undo what happened that spring afternoon in Kanagawa. Autopilot may promise a hands-free future, but when a life is on the line, what's needed isn't just smarter tech. It's a system that knows when its driver is asleep, and a driver who knows better than to trust the wheel alone. It was a bright and seemingly ordinary day on February 20th, 2021, in Mandalay, Myanmar. The streets buzzed with energy as protests continued against the military junta that had taken power. Among the passionate demonstrators was 16-year-old Wan Tun, a young worker who had dreams of a brighter future. Wan wasn't just protesting for himself, he was standing up for his country and his people, protesting the military coup that had taken control and imprisoned elected leaders. That day, Wan was in Thinbagyen, where he was volunteering to help injured protesters. It seemed like any other moment of defiance, but it quickly turned into something far darker. As protesters gathered, tensions escalated. The military, desperate to crush the dissent, began firing live rounds into the crowd. Wan, with a heart full of courage, rushed to assist those who had been struck by the bullets. In the midst of the chaos, a shot rang out, targeting Wan directly. The bullet struck him in the head, ending his life at the tender age of 16. It was a tragic, unnecessary death that shocked the nation and the world. Wan Tun became a symbol of the brutality faced by those fighting for democracy and freedom. His death was one of the first instances of bloodshed during what would come to be known as Myanmar's Spring Revolution, and it would ignite even more anger and determination in the protesters. The United States Embassy quickly condemned the violence, describing the killing as a deeply troubling act of aggression. But despite the pain and heartbreak, Wan's death wasn't in vain. His image became iconic. Protesters would carry his face, chanting his name and carrying on his fight. Wan's final words, "I don't think I can make it. Remember my face. Say my name. May my courage live on. Continue this fight for me, for I was taken away too soon," echoed through the streets, a rallying cry for all who still believed in the cause. In a small act of defiance and remembrance, the 41st Street Market, where Wan had worked, was renamed in his honor. The market, which had once been a symbol of mundane work and survival, became a place of tribute. Yan may have been just a child, but he had grown into a powerful symbol of resistance, a martyr for the cause of democracy in Myanmar. Though his life was tragically cut short, Wan Tun was loved by many, cherished by those who fought beside him, and remembered by those who followed his path. His legacy serves as a reminder of the sacrifices that young people have made throughout history, fighting for a better world. His story is a call to action, urging us to stand against injustice and ensure that such senseless loss of life never happens again. Let's honor his memory by continuing to push for peace and fairness in every corner of the world. March the 26th, 2016. Cue the dramatic music because today's the day two elite-level cave divers, Mike Young and Shane Thompson, a legit Navy vet, gear up for an underwater odyssey in the not-so-friendly, absolutely mysterious Santa Rosa Blue Hole in New Mexico. This place isn't some lazy river amusement ride. It's more like Mother Nature's underwater funhouse with a dark past. You see, the Blue Hole got shut down way back in 1976 after two divers tragically met their end in its depths. For 40 years it remained sealed, undisturbed, and haunting. That is, until a team of 10 brave souls said, "Let's open Pandora's swimming pool again," and dove right in. For the first 2 days, things went fairly smoothly. The team poked around the tunnels like deep-sea detectives, mapping out areas no one had seen for decades. But day 3, that was the real adventure. Mike and Shane had one job: explore a super-tight tunnel at 140 feet and then, if they still had wiggle room, literally, check out another squeeze at 165 feet. The plan was clear. Mike would go through the tightest bits solo, and Shane would chill at 165 feet and wait. Mike, doing his best impression of a contortionist submarine, twisted and squirmed his way through the rock-filled passages like he was auditioning for an underwater yoga class. Meanwhile, Shane was supposed to sit tight, but curiosity, that old troublemaker, got the best of him. Whether it was FOMO or the thrill of the unknown, Shane broke formation and followed Mike into the depths, completely against the plan. Creeping along, dodging boulders and sliding through twisty, claustrophobic turns, Shane eventually hit a silt-filled 3-foot opening. That's when things got real dicey. His back-mounted rebreather caught on a protruding rock. He flailed, twisted, tried to Houdini his way out, but nothing worked. He was stuck, and the clock was ticking. Suddenly, whack, Mike's arm smacked into Shane's head. Boom, underwater reunion. Nearly 200 feet down, they locked eyes. Shane blurted out, "Bro, I'm stuck." Mike, cool as ever, pulled off some deep-sea hero moves and freed Shane like a pro. But in the chaos, their only lifeline, the precious guideline, got nudged out of place. Whoops. Mike was now alone in a rock maze with no GPS. Meanwhile, Shane, still running on panic mode, bolted ahead and got tangled in the line. He freed himself, sure, but also lost it. Now, floating alone with no direction and anxiety spiking, he started hyperventilating, which is exactly what you don't want when using a rebreather. Enter Mike again, like Aquaman with better timing, grabs Shane and tries to guide him out. But then Shane, in full-blown panic, dives under Mike and gets stuck again. In the frantic struggle, he kicks Mike square in the face, shreds his suit, and leaves him soaked with 52 degrees Fahrenheit water. Not exactly the buddy system. Shane, now on his emergency air tank, charges ahead, only to get trapped a third time. Mike, thinking his partner was ahead, follows the line, until he realizes Shane's missing. His heart drops. He backtracks and finds Shane wedged in a narrow gap. Gear in tatters, mouthpiece out, tank empty. It was too late. Mike tried to save him, but there was nothing more he could do. With a heavy heart, he swam out alone to report the tragedy. The next day, he returned by himself, navigating the treacherous boulder field again, not just to retrieve a body, but to honor a friend lost in the deep. It was late morning on May 29, 2020, just outside the peaceful town of Arendal, Norway. The sun was out, the roads were quiet, and a truck driver was just doing his job, pulling over to fix a strap that had come loose on his trailer. A quick stop, he probably thought. Just a few minutes on the shoulder of the E18 highway, then back on the road. But he never got back in the truck. As the driver stood next to his trailer, tightening the strap, a Tesla Model S, cruising north with autopilot engaged, exited a tunnel nearby and continued up the road. The driver of the Tesla noticed the truck partly blocking the right lane, but assumed it was abandoned. No warning triangle, no flashing lights, just a big, still object in the sun, and a man in its shadow. Then, bang! The Tesla slammed into the side of the trailer, and the impact killed the truck driver instantly. The Model S's windshield shattered. The Tesla driver pulled over and walked back, only to find the body. A routine drive had just turned into a tragic accident scene. The truck had been parked just 181 meters past the tunnel exit. The shoulder was narrow, too narrow, so the trailer stuck out into the right lane. That's a no-no on highways for a reason, but the trucker didn't report his stop to traffic control, and no other motorists called it in either. So when the Tesla rolled out of the tunnel, the system, and its human, had no idea what was waiting up ahead. Now, about that human. He claimed he had both hands on the wheel, said he was alert, but investigators confirmed autopilot was definitely on, and while he might have thought he was in control, the car and the moment were driving him. The shadow from the trailer made the truck driver harder to see. One expert testified that the Tesla's view, and the driver's, was likely compromised by that darkness. And let's not forget, the truck was partially blocking a live lane, and yet didn't have any of the required safety warnings in place. So who was at fault? The court decided the Tesla driver bore enough responsibility to be charged with negligent homicide. In December 2020, he was sentenced to 3 months in prison. But it wasn't just a case of bad driving. The Accident Investigation Board, Norway, dug deeper and found something else. The road itself was part of the problem. See, the company that built that stretch of highway, Nye Veier AS, had originally planned for a wider 3-meter shoulder, which would have kept the truck completely out of the lane. But to save space, and probably money, they shrank it to 2 meters and promised to include safety mitigations. Spoiler alert, they didn't. So when tragedy struck, there was nowhere safe to pull over. No heads-up from traffic control, no proper warnings, and a driver relying on technology that wasn't built to see everything. It was a perfect storm of human misjudgment, system limitations, and road design shortcuts. But here's the upside. The accident sparked action. The investigation prompted new scrutiny into shoulder width, roadside emergency procedures, and driver responsibility when using semi-autonomous systems. Norway, a leader in road safety, took the findings seriously, and it's led to improvements in highway design and enforcement of roadside safety protocols. As for Tesla, the case added pressure to improve how autopilot handles stationary objects, especially large ones parked where they shouldn't be. This wasn't just another accident, it was a wake-up call, because when it comes to mixing high-tech cars with human error, it only takes a second for something small, like a loose strap, to lead to something irreversible. In the aftermath of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini's death in custody in September 2022, protests erupted across Iran, initially sparked by her tragic passing at the hands of the morality police. What began as an outcry over one woman's death evolved into a broader uprising against the oppressive Islamic Republic regime. However, the government's response was brutal, resulting in the unlawful killings of at least 23 children between September 20th and 30th, 2022, as security forces used live ammunition, metal pellets, and violent beatings to crush the protests. Amnesty International reported that the victims included 20 boys aged between 11 and 17 and 3 girls, aged 16 and 17. Many of the children were shot at close range with live ammunition, while others were killed by fatal beatings from security forces. The most harrowing case involved 11-year-old Javad Pashe, who was shot in the back of the head during a protest in Zahedan. 10 of the children killed were from Iran's oppressed Baluchi minority, with the deadliest day of the crackdown occurring on September 30th, when at least 7 children were shot in vital organs in Zahedan. Other children were killed in protests in Tehran, West Azerbaijan, and other provinces. Among the victims were 2 Afghan children, 14-year-old Mohammad Reza Sarvari and 17-year-old Satare Tajik, both killed during protests. The authorities attempted to cover up their involvement by spreading false narratives. Mohammad Reza Sarvari's burial certificate showed he died from a fast-moving projectile, yet the government claimed the deaths were suicides or accidents. Amnesty International condemned the Iranian regime's actions, with Hiba Morayev, the organization's regional director for the Middle East and North Africa, questioning how the international community could look these children and their families in the eye. Despite global outcry, the Iranian authorities have continued their violent repression, showing complete impunity for their crimes. The children's deaths represent 16% of the total casualties recorded by Amnesty International during the protests. This tragedy is part of a broader pattern of lethal force used by Iranian security forces, as seen in past protests, such as the November 2019 crackdown, which also resulted in the deaths of dozens of children. The regime's actions reflect a deep-rooted culture of impunity, where those in power are shielded from accountability for the most egregious human rights violations. Iran's government has continued to manipulate the narrative, coercing families of victims to falsely claim their children died by suicide or accidents, covering up their crimes with intimidation and harassment. The systematic violence against peaceful protesters, including children, highlights the Iranian regime's complete disregard for human rights. Despite this, the global community has been slow to act. As Iran's security forces maintain their grip on power, the world's failure to hold them accountable is seen as complicity in these horrific crimes. The deaths of these children, many of whom were simply demanding justice, underscore the brutality of the regime. They are symbols of the countless lives sacrificed in the fight for freedom, justice, and dignity in Iran.